as Councilmember Ford has mentioned, I did register my grave concerns to the Elections Commission, the Elections Clerk, the Attorney General, the Governor's Office, and everybody else that would listen, including the ACLU and the Federal Department of Justice. I believe that something really terrible happened in the primary election that was human-caused and shouldn't have happened. I won't go over all of it, but I will just point out, as an example, one of the communities that never had a chance to vote was Nanavali, which 90% of it was blocked in physically on the day when the polls opened and closed, and they never had another chance. Nanavali is quite remarkably the poorest community in our district. So it's a real civil rights violation that a whole class of people were not affected. We're affected by this. I think Councilmember Iligan deserves a fair election and no asterisk by his name about whether or not it really was won. But the fact is that the early walk-in voting and the election day voting showed the need for a runoff. And then his two top challengers, both of their neighborhoods, never voted. It's not fair. With all respect to Councilmember Iligan, he doesn't deserve an asterisk by his name over this election. As the only elected official on the ground, familiar with the actual conditions on the ground, who was not a candidate that day, and he wouldn't take my call. Over and over again, he wouldn't take my call. I find it outrageous. I've already registered my complaint about that. But on the county level, I want to commend our county clerk, Stuart Maeda, who was very receptive to my calls, both that day and each of the following days when I needed his help, and he forwarded my messages, and he forwarded Mr. Naga's messages back to me. I think the council can urge or send a letter to the state elections office urging absentee ballots for the Puna district, at least for the general election, because what's clear is we don't know what the conditions will be that day. This time we know it months in advance, not a couple of days in advance, and that would result in a fair election where everybody has a chance to vote. And you guys don't have the power to compel that, but you have the power to request that of the elections office, and I urge you to do so. Thank you very much.
Both the senator and I have filed written protests all the way up the chain to the Department of Justice. They have opened an investigation on this election. The reason, and I will have Mr. Maeda come down and give us his report and his plan of action. I can only second everything the senator said, because it's true that people were trapped. And what I see happening at the state level and even at the county level is a general refusal to accept that there were several, if not many, subdivisions that were literally trapped inside their subdivisions on both the primary day and the makeup day. NAGO does not want to address that, and we are not addressing it adequately either. So we have disenfranchised voters, and we've got a lot of really unhappy people. So you heard testimony from Hope, I don't know if she's still here, about the number of people who've signed petitions, about 1,000 people. So people are really upset about this. Do I think it's going to cause a change in the primary? No, I don't think it's going to cause a change in the primary. But certainly we need to change what happens in the general election.
By right, I think District 4 and 5 should have been closed and not voted. 4 was severely impacted. 5 was impacted, not the same way that 4 was, but impacted greatly enough that there were a lot of people, excuse me, that I've talked to and I know that just didn't have a chance to vote. I mean, for example, I was out of power for over a week. You know, you're cutting down trees, going around, and it was just a time to come together. I mean, that's what I was doing, driving around in my truck with my chainsaw, doing what I could do to do stuff like that. And it wasn't a time to vote. It was hard at best. So that's District 5. Now District 4 is clear that was needed to be shut down. The whole District 4. My opinion would have been 4 and 5, but I mean it's clear that 4 had to be shut down. No question about it. What happened after that blows my mind. It is just absolutely outrageous. I know that the law said 21 days we have to run a special election. I don't know if the state just didn't get that we have this unique geographical situation in Puna. We have a unique mailing situation in Puna. excuse me, most people have P.O. boxes. So the thought of, okay, how do I say this? Chronologically, this, when the press releases were coming out for the makeup election, the first press release said that there would be a district open in HPP, or a polling place open in HPP, and there would be a polling place open in Keone Poco. So the 2 precincts that were closed down would be open on the special election day. Within 10 minutes, another press release came back and said only Keone Poco is going to be open on special election day. What? That doesn't make any sense. Half of the voting population in District 4 resides in HPP. You're gonna, and if you just look at a map, you got to drive out of HPP. You got to drive the most likely way that most people aren't traveling, because it's away from town, and drive all the way down to Keone Poco to vote. No wonder you don't get a voter turnout. It doesn't make any sense. If you're going to make a special election, at least have those precincts open up, or do something special to have a common place. If they would have said Pahoa, I know it might not be legal to change that around, but if it would have been in Pahoa, it would have been more reasonable and would have had more voters going out there. But to hold a special election and only give people in Puna a week, a notification, if that, is ridiculous. When people are recovering from a storm, and even if there was no storm recovery, the way that most people check their mail is like once a week, maybe twice a week. It's just a different way of life. It's not like you get your mail delivered every day, go check your mailbox. And for some reason, on the state side, they didn't think of that. They didn't consider that. So, as Ms. Ford said, 14 days would be a minimum. I would even push it out longer than that. Get that notification out there. I wrote a letter in support as well for stating this information through Hope. It's ridiculous. So I would say, if you guys have to consolidate, please try to consolidate in an area that would be common. And if you can't consolidate, don't close down the precincts. And again, I don't think this was done on the county level. I think you guys have a good program. I'm just blown away by what happened. Can't believe what happened. Doesn't even matter. I mean, the results are that doesn't matter. It's when you look at the percentage and the turnout, that's all you have to do, is do that math, and you can see it was done in the worst possible way it could have been done, or almost the worst possible way it could have been done. And again, that's not, I think, the county side of it. We're doing the very best we can. Those aren't our shots to make. If those are our shots to make, we would have been, I think, done it a lot different. So I think that you guys have a good plan. I would really, honestly, depending on what happens here, if this lava opens up more, give everybody a mail-in ballot, mail-out a ballot. Everybody have an absentee ballot. I'm not sure if we can do that with the law that we have, or if there's some type of proclamation that could be made, but that would be a fail-safe. If everybody had one, you can still walk in, you can do whatever you want, but everybody in that area, has that. That would be the ultimate fail-safe. And in my opinion, that's what we should have, because what happened last time is just unbelievable.
A national philosophy in regards to elections is that whenever there's a postponed election, you need to try to have the postponed election look and be as similar as the primary election was for all of the voters. And so in looking at that, and when the Monday after the hurricane or the tropical storm hit, there was the indication from Civil Defense and Public Works that the roads would be open. Then the decision was made to do it as a polling place election, which was similar to what all the other voters had experienced. And we, on the county level, actually wanted to have it a couple weeks out, but HRS doesn't allow for that. If you have a polling place election, it has to be within 7 days of the primary election, and that's why it had to be done so quickly. And so there's some fundamental things that exist that kind of tie our hands in some ways, and we have to try to follow those things. And so that's why it kind of occurred that way. I guess in retrospect, if the other precincts in that lower Puna area, if we knew the extent that those voters were trapped, the recommendation could have been made to have a postponed election for them, but we did not receive that information to make that recommendation or to even talk about those things. And the timeline was really tight, because once the polls had opened, we had no way to change anything. It was kind of set It was kind of, the ball had been rolling already. The governor, within his powers, could have extended the polling hours for those precincts, but in talking to Senator Ruderman, the realization was that extending it any amount of time would not have made a difference for those folks. And so that's why I think the decision was made not to extend.
So whose idea was it to only open up one precinct on the special election day?
Well, the HPP, we would wanted to have both precincts open, but HPP, the community center was severely damaged. It wasn't known if it was going to be cleared by the time the continued primary was going to occur. And so we decided that because there were so many unknown factors about that we just weren't able to use that facility. There were power lines across the driveway. It was still blocked. It had not been cleared yet.
So in hindsight, doing a traditional polling place was wrong. It should have been mailed out. Because there was just, you know what I mean, when you look at, when you got half of the voting population in HPP, you can't even do a precinct there. And, I mean, it's obviously easy to look at it now and be like, coulda, shoulda, woulda done this. I guess the reason for this is to make sure that we learn from this and don't have the same thing happen twice. So that would be my suggestion. Which is going to come up tomorrow. It's another part of that conversation. So,
yeah. Thank
you, Mr. Mieta.
When Isel happened, August 7th, everything changed. And I do want to point out what you did right. And what you did right was close HPP and Keone Poco. I feel that 5 should also have been closed too. And right after Isel, when I drove around, it was bad. And Albizia trees was like 90% of the damage. We just could not get around. Now, when I heard that you were gonna do the makeup poll at the end of the month, I was pretty relieved, because when I walked around, people had told me that they couldn't get out, they couldn't vote that day. And after the 15th, and I talked to some people and they told me stories that they were turned away and they wanted to vote on the 15th, but they didn't get a chance because that precinct was open on the 9th. And it's unfortunate. I wish it could have been done different. One of the things that I really want to make sure gets changed is that one of the biggest concerns, one of many concerns, is that the only option was to vote digitally. And I felt the option to vote paper needed to be there. I like going to the polls because of the paper copy. I felt that was taken away. It was only digital, and that should not happen again.
Mr. Maeda, I don't know if you can pull this off, but I would like to see that the general election for 2014 be for Puna only, and possibly not the Cooper Center area. Okay, Volcano's in Puna, but they only had a small amount of impact from the storm. But because of the lava flow, we know we've got a disaster. We don't know what's going to happen. Can we please just do all mail ballots for Puna, districts 4 and 5, and that section of 3 that's part of Puna? If there's a precinct in there, I don't know if there is. Is there a precinct in District 3? I know there's a finger that is.
The districts, the precincts that will be affected are going to be
1, 2, 3, and 4.
Keone Poco, the Poho High School and the Poho Community Center.
Okay.
Those are the, HPP is the next closest precinct, but they're not going to be affected by the
Okay.
lava flow.
I just think to be fair, treat everybody in Puna equally, mail ballots to everybody in districts 4 and 5, and not even worry about this in any, whether it's a incoming storm or anything else. We know we got a problem going on, so let's deal with it up front. That's my request to you. See if you can get an all mail ballots into districts 4 and 5. That's my request. Thank you.